Pure evil incarnate. Michael Myers isn't human, but rather the physical embodiment of pure evil. Dr. Samuel Loomis describes Michael throughout the original 1978 Halloween as having the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes, insisting that what looked at him wasn't a man, but something else entirely. Loomis spent 8 years trying to reach Michael at Smith's Grove Sanitarium, concluding that behind Michael's eyes was purely and simply evil. The theory argues that Loomis wasn't speaking metaphorically, but literally describing a supernatural entity wearing human form. Michael survives being shot 6 times and falling from a second-story balcony in the original film, with his body disappearing moments after Loomis confirms he's dead. Throughout the franchise, Michael endures stabbings, burnings, explosions, and being shot dozens of times, yet continues returning without explanation. Director John Carpenter stated in interviews that he intended Michael as almost supernatural, a force of nature, rather than a person with psychology or motivation. This interpretation makes Michael terrifying because he can't be reasoned with, cured, or understood. He simply exists as evil made flesh, choosing Halloween night to manifest and kill for reasons beyond human comprehension. Loomis created him. Dr. Loomis's obsession with Michael potentially created the very monster he feared. This theory suggests that Loomis's treatment of young Michael as irredeemably evil became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The Halloween remake from 2007 shows Loomis telling 15-year-old Michael that he's wasting his time trying to treat him, essentially giving up and declaring the boy hopeless. If Loomis spent years telling Michael he was evil, describing him as inhuman, and treating him as something beyond redemption, Michael may have internalized this identity and become exactly what Loomis expected. Smith's Grove's treatment methods in the 1960s and 70s were primitive by modern standards, often involving isolation, heavy medication, and dehumanizing conditions. The theory argues that instead of helping Michael, the psychiatric system, and particularly Loomis's approach, destroyed whatever humanity remained after Judith's murder. Loomis's famous speeches about Michael being pure evil could reflect his own guilt, projecting his failure as a psychiatrist onto his patient. By treating Michael as a monster rather than a damaged child, Loomis removed any possibility of recovery or redemption. This reading transforms Loomis from a heroic doctor, warning about danger, into a tragic figure whose methods created the threat he spent decades trying to stop. Copycat Network. Multiple people have worn the Michael Myers mask across the franchise, explaining inconsistencies in his characterization and abilities. Fans point to significant differences in Michael's height, build, and physical capabilities across different films. The Michael in Halloween from 1978 stands approximately 5 feet 10 inches, while later sequels show him at 6 feet 2 inches or taller. His strength varies dramatically, from struggling with doors and victims in the original to effortlessly overpowering multiple adults simultaneously in later films. The theory suggests that after the original Michael's death or disappearance, others adopted his identity, either inspired by his crimes or as part of the Thorn cult's activities. Halloween 4. The Return of Michael Myers, from 1988, shows Michael returning after supposedly dying in a hospital explosion 10 years earlier, but the Michael who emerges could be a different person, wearing the recovered or replicated mask and coveralls. This would explain why Michael's behavior changes between timelines, why his motivations shift from random killing to family-focused murder, and why his supernatural resilience increases over time. Multiple killers would mean the legend of Michael Myers became larger than any single person, transforming into an identity that different individuals could assume. Samhain connection. Michael Myers draws supernatural power, specifically from Halloween night through connection to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. Throughout the franchise, Michael only actively kills on October 31st, remaining dormant or comatose the rest of the year. The original Samhain festival marked the time when the barrier between the living world and the realm of the dead grew thinnest, allowing spirits to cross over and dark magic to reach peak potency. The theory argues that Michael, whether human or supernatural entity, taps into this ancient power source that strengthens him on Halloween night specifically. Dr. Loomis in Halloween 2 from 1981 references Samhain when discussing Michael's nature, suggesting Loomis recognized the connection between Michael and ancient evil traditions. Michael's seemingly supernatural abilities, his capacity to survive lethal injuries, and his inhuman strength could all stem from Halloween night itself empowering him. When Halloween ends and November 1st arrives, Michael's power fades, explaining why he disappears or becomes vulnerable after his killing sprees conclude. This theory connects the franchise to actual folklore, rather than inventing entirely new mythology, suggesting Michael represents a modern manifestation of ancient evil that humans have feared for thousands of years. Collective fear. Haddonfield's collective belief in Michael's unkillability actually sustains him and prevents his death. This theory proposes that Michael operates as a tulpa, or thought form, a being created and sustained by concentrated belief and fear. After 40 years of Haddonfield residents telling stories about the unstoppable Shape, who murdered babysitters in 1978, the legend grew more powerful than the man. Every parent warning their children about Michael Myers, every newspaper article recounting his crimes, and every person who believes he cannot be killed adds energy to his existence. The 2018 Halloween shows the entire town traumatized by Michael's original spree, with residents living in fear for decades. Tommy Doyle, Lindsay Wallace, and other survivors built their lives around the belief that Michael would return, essentially willing him back into existence through their obsessive preparation and expectation. When enough people believe something is unkillable, indestructible, and inevitable, that belief might manifest as reality. This interpretation adds meta-commentary to the franchise, suggesting the audience's demand for Michael to return in sequel after sequel literally brings him back to life. The more we watch, discuss, and perpetuate Michael Myers as a cultural icon of unstoppable evil, the more real and powerful he becomes. Ben Tramer Incident. Ben Tramer's death in Halloween 2 proves Michael possesses reality-warping abilities that manipulate fate itself. Ben Tramer, a boy Laurie Strode mentioned having a crush on in the original film, dies in Halloween 2 when he's mistaken for Michael by police. Tramer happens to be wearing a similar costume, happens to be in the exact wrong place at the exact wrong moment, gets hit by a speeding police car, and then explodes when the vehicle crashes into a parked van. The coincidence seems impossibly convenient, with every variable aligning perfectly to kill someone connected to Laurie. The theory argues that Michael's evil extends beyond physical violence into supernatural manipulation of causality and probability. He doesn't need to personally kill everyone connected to his targets, because his presence warps reality to eliminate them through seemingly natural circumstances. The odds of Tramer wearing a similar outfit, walking down that specific street, and being killed in that precise manner are astronomically small unless supernatural influence arranged the variables. This ability would explain other convenient deaths and near misses throughout the franchise, suggesting Michael's evil influences events in ways beyond direct action, making him not just a physical threat, but a force that corrupts reality itself. Government Black Project Michael Myers was part of a classified government experiment, testing whether evil could be isolated, studied, and potentially weaponized. Smith's Grove Sanitarium served as a cover facility for military or intelligence research during the Cold War era, when the government conducted numerous secret experiments on unwilling subjects. The theory suggests that Michael's treatment between 1963 and 1978 wasn't standard psychiatric care, but rather observation and testing of a child who murdered his sister. Dr. Loomis's unusual credentials, his complete access to Michael, despite being the patient's personal psychiatrist, and the facility's willingness to keep Michael locked up without real rehabilitation attempts, all suggest Smith's Grove had ulterior motives. Government agencies during the 1960s and 70s researched mind control, psychological warfare, and human behavior modification, often using institutionalized individuals as test subjects. Michael could have been given experimental drugs, subjected to psychological conditioning, or exposed to techniques designed to enhance his violent tendencies rather than cure them. Loomis's role becomes more sinister if he was knowingly participating in or documenting the experiment rather than genuinely trying to help his patient. The theory explains why Michael was never transferred to a higher security facility, despite being diagnosed as dangerous, why his case received such focused attention from one doctor for 15 years, and why releasing him or executing him never seemed to be considered options. By the way, if you're finding this interesting, I post content like this all the time. I'd appreciate if you subscribed. Laurie summoned him. Laurie Strode's trauma obsession and 40 years of preparation unconsciously summoned Michael Myers back to Haddonfield. The 2018 Halloween timeline shows Laurie spending 4 decades turning her home into a fortress, training with weapons, and preparing for Michael's inevitable return. The theory argues that Laurie's intense focus, her refusal to move on, and her certainty that Michael would come back created a psychic beacon that drew him to her. When Michael escapes during the transfer to a maximum security facility in the 2018 film, he could be responding to Laurie's decades of concentrated thought and emotional energy directed at him. Their connection transcends normal victim and killer dynamics, becoming almost supernatural in its intensity. Laurie admits she prayed Michael would escape so she could kill him and finally end her nightmare, potentially manifesting exactly what she feared and desired. The theory suggests that if Laurie had moved away, changed her identity, and genuinely let go of her trauma, Michael might have have remained dormant or focused elsewhere. Instead, her preparation and obsession acted as a summoning ritual, ensuring Michael would eventually return to finish what started in 1978. This reading adds tragic irony to Laurie's character, making her both victim and unwitting architect of her own continued suffering. Random selection. Michael choosing Laurie Strode in 1978 was completely random, meaningless chance, with no deeper significance. Director John Carpenter stated in numerous interviews that he originally conceived Michael as motiveless evil, a killer who selected victims arbitrarily without pattern or reason. The opening scene of Halloween shows Michael stalking Laurie as she walks to school, watching her drop off a key at the Myers house. The theory argues that this moment of random observation determined everything that followed, with Laurie simply being in Michael's line of sight at the wrong moment. No cosmic destiny, no family connection, no supernatural bond existed until Halloween 2 retroactively added the sibling twist in 1981. Carpenter expressed frustration with this retcon, believing it diminished the horror by providing explanation and motivation. The most terrifying interpretation presents Michael as completely random evil that could strike anyone anywhere for no reason. Laurie wasn't special or chosen or connected to Michael in any meaningful way. She was simply unlucky enough to be noticed by a killer who needed targets. This reading restores the original film's existential dread, the understanding that violence doesn't always have meaning or purpose or justice. Sometimes people die for no reason, selected by chance, victims of arbitrary evil that doesn't care about their stories or significance. Jamie's visions. Jamie Lloyd's psychic connection to Michael in Halloween 4 and 5 suggests blood relatives can sense his presence and experience his perspective. Jamie, Laurie's daughter, and Michael's niece, begins having vivid visions of Michael's actions in Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers from 1989. She feels his emotions, sees through his eyes during kills, and senses when he's near, despite having no normal way to know his location. The theory proposes that members of Michael's bloodline share a supernatural connection with him, a psychic link that intensifies with proximity and blood relation closeness. Jamie's visions aren't random premonitions, but actual telepathic connection to her uncle, possibly a two-way channel that lets Michael sense her as well. This would explain Michael's relentless focus on hunting down specific family members across multiple films, drawn to them through supernatural awareness rather than investigation or luck. The connection could stem from whatever made Michael evil in the first place, a hereditary curse or supernatural taint that runs through the Myers bloodline. If this theory holds, any blood relative of Michael would eventually develop the ability to sense him, making escape impossible because he can always find family members through their shared psychic bond. Evil contagion. Michael's evil operates as a transferable spiritual infection that corrupts others through prolonged exposure or trauma. Halloween Ends from 2022 introduces Corey Cunningham, a young man who accidentally kills a child and becomes Haddonfield's new pariah. After encountering Michael and locking eyes with him in the sewers, Corey begins exhibiting Michael's characteristics, learning to kill and eventually partnering with Michael before trying to assume his role entirely. The film suggests that Michael's evil isn't contained to his individual person, but rather exists as a contagious force that can spread to susceptible hosts, people who experience severe trauma in Haddonfield, who are isolated and broken by the town's cruelty, become vulnerable to infection by the same evil that created Michael. Corey's transformation happens rapidly after his encounter with Michael, suggesting direct contact accelerates the corruption process. This theory explains why Haddonfield produces multiple killers, and why the town itself seems cursed beyond just one man's actions. Evil becomes a communicable disease, spreading from Michael to others who are emotionally or psychologically weakened. The implications are disturbing because it means Michael isn't unique, and that his defeat wouldn't end the threat, as infected individuals would continue perpetuating the cycle of violence. Mob creates monsters. Haddonfield's mob mentality and vigilante justice perpetuates cycles of evil rather than preventing them. Halloween Kills from 2021 shows the town forming an angry mob determined to hunt down and execute Michael themselves rather than trusting authorities. The mob's paranoia leads them to attack an escaped mental patient who resembles Michael, beating an innocent man to death while the real Michael continues killing elsewhere. The theory argues that Haddonfield's collective trauma response creates new monsters by ostracizing, attacking, and destroying anyone deemed dangerous or different. Corey Cunningham's transformation in Halloween Ends directly results from years of the town treating him as a monster for an accident, their cruelty and rejection pushing him toward actual evil. The town's obsession with Michael, their refusal to heal or move forward, and their embrace of violence as solution rather than problem ensures evil continues regenerating. Every generation of Haddonfield residents traumatizes versus the next, creating damaged individuals who either become killers themselves or enable killers through their paranoia and mob behavior. This reading positions Haddonfield itself as the true villain, a community so poisoned by fear and violence that it manufactures its own nightmares regardless of Michael's presence. Tommy as successor. Tommy Doyle became so obsessed with Michael Myers that he potentially continues Michael's work as a copycat killer. Tommy, the child Laurie babysat in 1978, grew into an adult consumed by the Myers case. Halloween 6. The Curse of Michael Myers, from 1995, shows adult Tommy living across the street from the Myers house, monitoring the property and researching Michael's history obsessively. The theory suggests Tommy's fixation crossed from survivor trauma into dangerous identification with his childhood nightmare. His extensive knowledge of Michael's patterns, his choice to remain in Haddonfield near the Myers house, and his aggressive behavior in Halloween Kills indicate someone who never escaped that night psychologically. Some versions of this theory propose that certain kills attributed to Michael in later films might actually be Tommy's work, either helping Michael or acting independently while wearing a similar costume. Tommy's character represents how trauma can transform victims into perpetrators, how studying evil long enough risks becoming infected by it. His presence in multiple timelines and his role organizing the mob in Halloween Kills show someone whose entire identity revolves around Michael Myers, suggesting unhealthy psychological territory where the line between opposing evil and embodying it becomes blurred. Dimensional doorway. The Myers house at 45. Lampkin Lane serves as a permanent portal between our reality and a dimension of pure evil. The theory proposes that the location itself, not Michael, is the source of supernatural corruption. Something about that specific address, whether geographical positioning, historical events, or structural configuration, created a weak point in reality where evil can enter our world. Michael's murder of Judith in 1963 might not have caused the house's evil, but rather occurred because the house's influence corrupted young Michael first. Every subsequent owner or resident of the Myers house experiences tragedy, violence, or supernatural phenomena, suggesting the building itself radiates malevolent energy. The house appears in different conditions across various timelines, but always stands as the epicenter of Michael's activities, the place he returns to regardless of his nominal goals or targets. Architectural analysis by fans notes impossible geometry in the house's interior layout, rooms that shouldn't exist based on exterior dimensions, and windows that appear in different locations between shots. These inconsistencies could indicate the house exists partially in another dimension, its interior larger and stranger than physical space allows. If the house is the true source, destroying Michael accomplishes nothing because the portal remains open, ready to corrupt or empower the next person who enters. If you enjoyed this, consider subscribing so you don't miss out on every upload. Thanks for watching.